Right, well, it's terrific, as I said, to be, as Paul Murray calls it, in the Freedom Fortress, and joined tonight with Bronwyn Bishop, former Speaker of the House of Representatives, Tina McQueen, the Federal Vice President of the Liberal Party, newly re-elected. Congratulations to you, Tina. And former Queensland Premier Campbell Newman, who's holding the fort in Brisbane. Good to have you with us tonight.
Great to be with you, Gary.
Excellent. All right, well, that's good. We've got everybody talking. Everyone's now plugged in, and this is all very good. Let's have a little talk about the drought, because the drought is a thing that I have been constantly talking about. And, well, Tina, I find it stunning. I think there's a lot of insiders who are in the ears of those making the decisions, and people on the outside, the ones who are having the decisions made for them, are feeling a real disconnect. The anger towards the Prime Minister is very loud. I said last week I think the Prime Minister's circling the problem. I think he knows where it is. He's got it corralled. He's going to pounce. There's going to be a moment. It's not far off, but it can't come soon enough.
Yeah, it's a complex issue, Gary, but, you know, there's so many families. I think tradition and the different generations on the farm is so important. I think we've got to do what we can to keep that. I think it would be unwise to let all those little guys just rot and the big corporates take over. I think the Prime Minister is doing a very good job with the balancing act he's got, but you can't, when those voices raise up and sing out and say what they want, Gary, you really can't ignore them. It's such an emotive issue for so many people. A lot of people have lost their farms or lost their families on the farm. The suicide rates alone. No one wants to see these problems continue. It's a tough ask. Look, I think you're right. I think he's circling, but I'm confident he'll get there in the end, Gary. I really do believe.
Well, I can get why you'd be confident, but Bronwyn Bishop, my point about the insiders is, I'll pick on the National Farmers Federation. I don't know the people running the thing now. All I know is that looking in, it's been 35, 36 years since they've had anything relevant to say. They are a lobby group who can see Parliament House out their front window. They seem to be the voice that says they speak for the farmers, but not all the farmers I know have got nothing to do with the NFF. What the heck are they doing?
That's exactly right, Gary. They're sort of the professional lobby group, aren't they?
Oh,
and
yeah.
all they know, they're part of the bubble that Scott talks about. Look, I think that what is happening with regard to the drought debate has really caught the heartstrings and the emotions, as well as the minds of ordinary Australians. The amounts of money they're giving, the care they have, I think is palpable, and I don't think it can be ignored. Now, I hope the Prime Minister is going to find an answer where the money goes to the farmers, or the water that they need, or the fodder that they need goes to farmers. Now, because I understand the federal system, as you do, Gary, the states do have the responsibility for things to do with the land. That's the way the Constitution was set up. But that doesn't stop the federal government providing the money to the state governments to do certain things. Now, example, for donated fodder, there is a complete subsidy for transporting that fodder from the place where it's being grown to a depot where people can come and pick it up. There is no such subsidy for water. Had we still got the categories where we could declare a national emergency, then different sets of rules apply to whether we have subsidies for water as well as fodder. In other words, there's a bureaucratic mess out there, and I've had a group of people come to me in the last few days with a very well-reasoned and costed plan which could deliver something like 65 million litres of water into those parched areas of the lower Lachlan and those areas that are west of Dubbo itself. Right. And that's where the need really is. They don't need to be told about pipes. They certainly don't need to hear about weed control, because there aren't any. They do need to hear, are we going to get some water? Are we going to get some food for our cattle and for our sheep, because we've got to hand feed them? So I just hope that there's an opening where we can hear that money can flow from the federal government to the states where the real problems are, and that's Queensland and New South Wales. They're the two main states. There's no real drought south of the Murray, and then you come to the problem of the Murray-Darling Basin.
Wow.
And that is a disgrace.
Well, it's a bureaucratic insanity. And I mean, the bureaucracy, Campbell Newman, I get your reaction to what state governments should be doing in a moment, but I'll just say this, that I know that people in the rail industry want to move large volumes of water from the east coast of New South Wales out to the west, but New South Wales rules say that the amount of water that they want to move is in fact contravening there's some sort of ordinance or act that they would actually come afoul of. So in other words, if they want to load up a gigalitre of water on a train and move it, even if it was strategically possible, engineeringly wise possible, the problem is the bureaucracy. So Campbell Newman, at the state level, I mean, you've been a premier, you understand the water thing because you lived through all of this as both the Lord Mayor of Brisbane and then later as premier. This whole business of state governments being reluctant to do stuff is just driving me crazy.
Well, I had a bit to say about this a few weeks ago on the front page of the Australian newspaper, Gary, and essentially there is a culture within state governments and indeed the federal government's environmental organisation or environment department, which is about not doing stuff, particularly when it comes to water. And the big thing the Prime Minister could be doing is dealing with the Federal Environmental Protection Biodiversity Conservation Act, the EPBCA. I won't say it again, but that piece of legislation is the single biggest blocker to building dams for the future. And that's something the federal government can do. It can look to the long term. It can give farmers and rural communities hope for the long term by actually cutting through the red tape once and for all in this hour of need. Turn to the states. We've seen in Queensland, for example, I can speak with some authority, we have a couple of departments stacked with activists. The State Environment Department here, the State Department of Natural Resources has people embedded within it who don't want to act when it comes to new supplies of water for irrigation schemes and the like. Those people need to be dealt with and the politicians need to get control. Another thing, just broadening out, Gary, I think really this all ties into a whole policy for rural and regional Australia about building up the economies, about encouraging people to go there, getting real about that sort of stuff. And as an example, what you can do, what an exciting and positive story we saw in the last 2 or 3 days about the town of Tenterfield, a very famous community in terms of our federation, where Tenterfield went out and got water. What about support for other communities to go and do that and at least support the actual, the centre of rural and regional life, being the local township, and then moving out from there in terms of what you can do?
Yeah, well, look, there's certainly a need for all of that, and to incentivise that in some sort of a way is critical. And the problem now is that the economy is being seen as weak and soft. There's lots of evidence of all of that. The federal government is putting money into the states' hands. The states aren't necessarily passing some of it on. The Institute of Company Directors have done their director sentiment report's been released this afternoon. I can say to you that they say that 64% of directors in the state of Queensland see the economy as weak. And one of the reasons is not enough rural infrastructure and drought. People aren't spending money, Tina. They're afraid to part with cash, whether it's big businesses, small businesses, corner stores, the whole lot. I mean, Paul Murray talked about buy from the bush last night. Well, we're almost going to have a campaign to go and buy from your local small business because people are just not spending money. There's not a lot of confidence out there.
Gary, fear will kill an economy. There's no question about that. And it's good. I mean, we've got to harp on about the drought and the dams, everything else. But I tell you what I'm going to concentrate on, where my efforts will go. Christmas is coming up. Now, a lot of children in these drought-stricken areas, there's not going to be Christmas presents, Gary. There's not going to be money for birthday parties. There's not going to be money for football boots, for school shoes. I am going to set up something. I'm going to do it very quickly, but to make sure all these kids in these drought-stricken areas do not go without. That will be my mission. You know, that's what really tugs at my heartstrings, Gary, thinking kids they're going without what they need.